it's Anthony here at Talk and Review, and today we're looking at Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 3, titled The Long Night. There is absolutely a lot to cover in this episode, and I'm going to pick out the points now that I think I would like to talk to you about and let you know what I thought about them. So overall, the battle in itself, the scale of this episode, there is no denying the absolute enormity of this episode. So it did take 55 consecutive night shoots to complete this one battle. Here's where I have an issue with this. So whilst the scale of the battle is absolutely enormous, and you can't deny it through dragon fights, through just battle in itself, I found it at times a little bit draining because it's so battle heavy. There were at times it started to focus on a lot of things that you just didn't need to know, and it spent far too much time on things that just really weren't that important. As well as it being exclusively shot at night, as I said, it was 55 consecutive night shoots. With it being shot at night and with the only real light source is either the moon or fire, it makes it very hard for you to know exactly what is going on and what is happening with who. Now, I've watched this episode a couple of times now, and the second time I watched it, I had to turn my brightness up on my TV to 100, so maxed out the brightness on the TV, and at that point I could only just then see what was going on. But then again, I was looking for the things that I didn't see the first time. So even if I was watching it with max brightness the first time, I still don't think that I would have seen everything because of the way that it's shot. Now that's, in my opinion, for something of this scale, is a little bit unforgivable. This battle has been hyped up so much to be the biggest battle that you have ever seen on TV and in film. But the problem is, I didn't get to see half of it because it was all in dark. And that's a big problem when you're hyping up this battle to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, essentially. They're hyping this up to the nth degree, and then to not be able to see it. And I'm not alone in this. I've spoken to many people, and there's been a lot of talk about it on social media and a lot of memes that have been created that are essentially saying that no one could actually see what was going on, which is it was a bit of a disappointment, put it that way. It was a bit of a disappointment. The dragon fighting, again, if this was something that I could see fully going on, I think I would have been really on board with it, but it suffered due to the lack of lighting. But what I did see, I really enjoyed. The brutality in which these two dragons meet each other with is exactly what I would expect from a dragon fight, and it was something that you were really anticipating to be somewhat of an amazing spectacle, simply because they're two dragons. We've seen the dragons harmonise and they've always been nice, but when you get them fighting together, it would be really interesting to see what this looked like. And it did deliver from what I saw. Half of Viserion's face got ripped off, which is exactly what you would expect to see from a dragon fight. But again, it was hard to know because half of it I couldn't really make out. Okay, so let's talk about character deaths as well. So, and I don't know if this was promised by creators, by the actors themselves, or whether or not this was just speculation amongst the fans because of how hyped up the battle was going to be. But myself and pretty much everyone I know were expecting a lot of big major deaths in this episode. We did get deaths in this episode, do not get me wrong, we did get deaths in this episode. But no one of real import or no one of real consequence dies in this episode, which is a real problem for me, because when you look at the track record of Game of Thrones, in instances like this and in big things like this, major characters die. And the reason for that is war kills people. And what you have in this episode is you have all your main characters that seem to be impervious to death, even when the only outcome for them is certain death. Now, what I mean by that is, look at Jaime Lannister. A couple of seasons ago, Jaime was being taught how to fight by Bronn, and he could barely swing a sword enough to even make a dent on a tree. He's got one hand. He's managed to fight off the army of the dead with one hand and not really being able to swing a sword because it's with his weak hand. You've got Samwell Tarly, who is known to not be very aggressive and not be very manly at all. He seems to survive the entire show and not die. That doesn't really make sense. You get moments where all of these characters are put in a position where the only single outcome for them is certain death. Yet for some reason, they managed to survive. Like I said, we did get some deaths in this. Beric dies, Jorah dies, Lyanna Mormont dies, Theon dies, and Ed dies. Now, Ed is the first casualty, and that happens exactly how I would expect it to happen. Right in the middle of battle, right in the middle of him trying to help Sam up, boom, he gets killed off straight away. Perfect. It was the start of what I thought was going to be many deaths. Unfortunately, it just didn't ramp up. The deaths that we did get, I will say, did a good job at those deaths. One of the other good deaths that I think was in this episode was Lyanna Mormont. So Lyanna Mormont originally was only supposed to be a one-scene character, but I think due to her being such a fan favourite, they kept her in the show. So it's not something that was designed to happen this way. It just naturally happened due to her being a fan favourite. Now, her death is interesting because it's not laid out like your Theon, your Beric, or your Jorah death. It's more laid out like Ed, more than anything. It's right in the middle of battle, but it is very characteristic of Lyanna. So she's basically knocked over by, I can only assume is 1-1. If any of you out there that you think that I'm wrong about that, let me know, but I'm sure that the giant that kills Lyanna is 1-1. So essentially he knocks her over, she then is pretty much broken at that point, but runs at him and he picks her up, and as he's crushing her, she takes a dragon glass dagger and sticks him in the eye and kills him. So it's a very characteristic death of that character, which was nice. And again, like I said, all the deaths of the characters that do die do justice for the death that they deserve. But the issue that I have is those characters were all pegged for certain death anyway. So to do it in an episode where all the bets are off, when you could use that opportunity to kill much more important characters, felt a little, not cheap, but it just fell a bit flat, and it just meant that those deaths were a little less meaningful simply because you expected more from it. So when it didn't deliver, it was just like, oh, is it just them? And I don't think it hit me as hard as it could have done is if it was a more important character. So Tyrion and Sansa had a little moment between themselves in the crypts once all the chaos was going on. They were hiding behind a tomb, and they had this moment where they weren't talking to each other. All it was silence between them with music playing in the background, and they were just staring at each other. But the situation that they were in, again, was impending doom. Now, it created this lovely moment between the two where they were staring at each other, knowing exactly what one another was thinking. I was thinking at this moment they were going to kiss. I'm not going to lie, that it did look like they were going to lean in for a kiss, and I'm glad that it didn't happen. He kissed her hand instead, and they've got that mutual admiration for each other. But in this moment, I think they both looked at each other knowing they need to go out and they need to defend what's left of the people in the crypts. Now, Sansa is the only one with any form of weapon. She pulls this out and she knows what she needs to do as the Lady of Winterfell. And as just a human being wanting to preserve life, she knows what she needs to do. And Tyrion knows that he is probably the only person in there that can try and help. So they look at each other knowing that they're probably going to die from what they're going to do. Of all the chaos ensuing, it just focused on these two characters. It wasn't long. It was a couple of seconds, a minute at most. But it was a nice moment just to take you out of all the chaos and to focus on these two characters that you've known and loved. And again, it provides a little bit of tension thinking, are these two going to die? They didn't, but it provided the tension nonetheless. So there's so many moments I could talk about in this episode, but I think I would be sat here until I'm blue in the face. So I'm going to go to the main moment of the episode, the big moment, the death of the Night King. Now, this is something that I completely did not see coming. If there was going to be an outcome of this episode, I never thought that the Army of the Dead would be defeated. I thought that if the Army of the Dead were going to be defeated, that it would be much later on, maybe in the last episode or the second to last episode, but it wouldn't be this early on, especially not after one battle. But the Night King was defeated. Now, it was an interesting way that the Night King was defeated because I don't think anyone ever really expected Arya to be the one to do it. I think there's been a lot of theories out there about who can do it, why they would do it, and who's the best person to do it. Me, personally, I think the only person that could really have killed the Night King was Jon, simply because of the history that they've got. But they chose Arya instead. Now, I've watched almost like a behind the scenes of inside the production of the episode, and the creators made a conscious decision to choose Arya for this person. Now, I don't know if George R.R. Martin has given them that direction because he's going to write it, or it's just a case of they wanted to do it for the shock value, but I'm not too sure that this opportunity was the right opportunity to take to kill the Night King. Or if it was the right opportunity, I'm not too sure that the episode was placed in the correct place for this season. Now, I can only say that now because I don't know what the next 3 episodes hold for us. But at the moment, if we don't revisit this storyline or nothing more materialises from the Army of the Dead, I don't think it was the right place for it. Not unless there's something completely spectacular in the next 3 episodes. So overall, I'm not going to lie, I didn't really enjoy this episode. There was a lot about it, there was too much about it that I disliked for me to say overall I liked it. I can appreciate the episode, I can completely appreciate the scale for it, but it just didn't sit right with me. And that's for a number of reasons, most of which I've gone over, but ultimately my biggest gripe behind this was the death of the Night King and how quickly it seemed like the Army of the Dead were killed. Now, the Army of the Dead and the White Walkers have really been pushed on us from the very first episode. If you remember episode 1 of season 1, the opening of the episode involved the White Walkers. Now, if they're going to be the big evil villain of the story, play to that. Don't then kill them off before the story ends. You have to keep reminding yourself throughout that the end game for this is the throne. And if that's the route you're going to take, I have no issue with that. But then don't use what should be a subplot, i.e. the White Walkers and the Army of the Dead, as a main plot, because when you come to the conclusion of that subplot, you're then going to be disappointed that that was probably more exciting and provided a lot more opportunity to do something with than the end game of the episode or end game of the series. And it leaves you with a bit of a sour taste in your mouth more than anything, because you think, well, this gives me so much opportunity to be able to do something with, yet I've wasted that opportunity for shock value just so we can be done with it, so we can focus on what we should have been focusing on the entire time. It just doesn't feel right for me. And if they were going to always end it this way, I would have much preferred them to have dealt with the race for the throne first and have that been dealt with and have that all wrapped up in a nice little package to say, so-and-so has won, they have gained the Iron Throne, a lot of people have died in the process, but now the big war is here, the war for the living. Because ultimately, the war for the living, I think, is a lot more important than the war for a throne. My opinion, I don't know if you guys agree with me or not. Just before we end and we sign off for the review, I want to talk about theories going forward. I want to know what your theories are for the rest of the season. I have a few theories and I've read a few theories online, mainly about the fact that the Night King isn't really gone. I think a lot of people are in denial, myself included. I think I'm a little bit in denial that this is over with. I think Bran has a much bigger part to play in this, and what I want to see going forward is there to be some shocks and some twists right at the end to show that actually Bran is much more involved with the Night King than we think, and not in a way that we initially thought. What I want to see is Bran actually turn into the big bad. What do you guys want to see? Do you want to see Bran become the big bad, or do you think that something else is going to happen that involves the Night King? Or do you just think the Night King is done for now, it's over? So that's episode 3. Unfortunately, it's not landed as well with me as it has with a lot of other people out there. I know that this is pretty much a Marmite kind of episode. A lot of people love it, a lot of people don't. Let us know your overall thoughts in the comment section below, and do me a favour and hit that like and subscribe button. We are reviewing each episode of Game of Thrones as they come out each week. We've also got other reviews coming out. So check us out on our social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram. We'll put in regular updates on those as well. I'll see you next week for episode 4 with hopefully an explanation with what's going on this week. If not, I won't be happy again. Peace!